right, let's talk about how arm swing actually contributes to jump height in different kinds of jumps, but particularly 99% of the research has actually been done on counter movement jumps are my least favorite kind of jumps, but it's the easiest to study. I do have some beef of it, but it is how it is. So generally the setup is like this. You have the same set of participants performing either a counter movement jumps, hands, what is this? Hands in front of the crotch versus hand free arm swing versions. And then you're just trying to compute A, what's the difference in jump height, and B, what are the different movement strategies behind these two variations of the jump. Okay. For those of you that really, really love force state testing, there's direct testing, reliability, and where you can learn from like a scientific analytical point of view, direct implications. But for us who just want to get jump higher, we want to see, okay, what exactly does arm swing help with? So some people say define contribution as like a percentage drop in the performance, but I'm actually more interested in other researchers are more interested in the causal mechanisms behind, why there's going to be, for example, a 10% difference or whatever. So some of the lenses, some of the papers that have looked at this, so this one from 2004 by Fellner and al., they again do the very classic comparison. So here's what the time series looks like with all of the beautiful figures. You have on top a counter movement jump arm swing with arm swing and one without arm swing. And this one actually looks to be hands on hips, unlike the previous funny figure. So they computed a lot of things. Okay. First of all, they have the acceleration of the different body parts as well as the whole body. So that's what you see here. And then, acceleration of the thigh, shank foot, etc., etc. They also have whole body center of mass velocity and the forces. So this is what people are most familiar with when it comes to counter movement jump analysis. So number one thing, right, the most obvious thing was that they compared the average ground action force. And what they found that was supported in later studies in counter movement jumps was that there was no difference in the average upward force. Okay. So it's not like you can apply a greater amount of force. But what was actually modified when you have arm swing versus not was the duration of force application. It's the duration of the phases that was changed. And again, I don't know why they chose this representation with time, because when you have this, you cannot show a difference in time. But this study showed that when you have arm swing, you can actually push for longer during the phase when you are at the very bottom. So it's from here, very bottom, to the toe off. So this is the phase also that directly contributes to jump height. So more impulse here encode more jump height in this phase, okay? And that's just as simple as basic physics. So I am trying to be nice here. So, chill out, John. So here you have, when the phase is augmented, you can technically generate more impulse, right? But then remember, you cannot say that you can generate more force. And that's why it's quite complicated. And people here also said that it's really because the lower leg and the whole body essentially operates as a linked chain system. You have one segment chained to the other to the other. They are all affecting each other in some, not clear ways, right? And there obviously you should expect participant differences as well. So when that happens, it's quite hard to say arm swing directly causes this, this, and that. Note that this is only in counter movement jumps. So it's comparing the extreme case of a lack of arm swing versus one that has a full arm swing. So if that leads to, for example, let's see how much the difference in jump height is in this scenario. Okay, so let's scroll. Where is it? Okay. Vertical velocity. I mean, this is fine. Okay, so when you have that extreme a difference, you have roughly, 2.81, 3.07. So it's like 0.2 millimeters per second. So, about, okay, it doesn't show the jump height here. That's annoying. But when you have that difference, right? Think about how much smaller it might actually be when you have a full arm swing. That's your theoretical ideal versus one that, maybe has less intention, right? How much difference would that actually make? I don't know. It's really hard to say, but it's worth noting that, arm swing isn't everything, right? It's really how arm swing affects the rest of your lower body and how they actually act. So that's one part, okay? The other thing that I really just brushed over is because the center of mass height at takeoff, that's almost an irrelevant factor when you have like arm swing like this versus one that's partial, because you're still the difference is going to be like 1 to 2 centimeters, right? And most times, unless you're going for a world record, most times it doesn't really matter the full arm swing versus partial arm swing at center mass height at takeoff. It's really the other part, how that augments how your lower limb contacts the ground. And that was actually investigated in this paper as well, where they did find that your lower limbs seems to be able to do a little more work when you have your arm swing as contribution. So here, for example, you have, the hips doing less, actually. Let's see, doing less, and then doing more. Okay, so right, it's really confusing. It's not like a straightforward difference that you end up seeing here. Let's see. So lowest point, you have lower hip moment, and then first to T1, that's when you sort of reverse and you start accelerating upwards. Also lower hip moment, right? It's not what you would expect in terms of the hip moments that should theoretically directly explain. Like you are prolonging the phases and you're actually, for most of your joints here, you're generating less moment, less torque. So your joints are actually doing less, right? That's so counterintuitive. And that's really what ends up happening a lot in these kind of studies. You just get weird counterintuitive results because it's not as simple as swing your arms harder, you jump higher, right? So here's another study, which found quite similar things. So it found that the average force during the propulsive phase, so that's the phase when your center mass is accelerating upward, very similar average force, at least from a p-value standpoint, right? You still see some difference, and actually the force is less, even though you see this huge variability in the data set. So meaning people to people, very, very different behaviors. But you do see a difference in the duration of the phase. So that's exactly the same as what's found before. The time to apply force was changed, but the average force you actually generate is the same. Now, how does this translate to other kinds of jumps? And I will be the first one to say, this is speculation from me, but there's plenty of studies that compared counter movement jumps. No, okay, when I say plenty, it's a relative measure. It's like 2 or 3. And those studies compared counter movement jumps with the running jump. And what do you know? It's very different. Okay, so obviously for some people they're almost trying to jump with the similar strategy between these two kinds of jumps. But for others, for example, if you have a big difference in your counter and your running, you obviously are performing very different movements. So in that case, plus you're performing a partial versus full Rama, or like whether you people say it's a pendulum or like a running, like a different kind of arm swing, you're gonna get similar benefits. So it's not like how much you actually helped. It's impossible to predict. And given the difference in running jumps versus counter movement jumps, you couldn't also say these exact mechanisms transfer, right? And I can say that more confidently because the current paper I'm working on looks at TOEFL running jumps with and without a ball. So if you join my studies, you will know that I asked you to do TOEFL running jumps with a ball or without a ball from the exact same starting point. We're trying to see what's different. So as a bit of a spoiler, both average force, ground contact durations were modified, but there are really large amount of participant differences, and also differences in whether the first leg or the second leg or the plant or the block was affected. So, instead of a very simple story, simple overarching story here, where it's A, center mass height at takeoff, and B, the duration of phases, it's a lot more complicated in a running jump. So it's not like you can say, oh, you nail your arm swing, you're gonna jump higher like this. I think it's many things into a running jump. It's like a means to an end. You practice enough, you'll get there. And my job as a biomechanics researcher and communicator is to explain, hey, what's more likely is there's like a billion ways to do this, right? As long as you have arm swing that satisfies the conditions of arms overhead at takeoff, and then you feeling like you're exerting yourself against the ground at your optimal and max capacity, you're probably fine with arm swing. Okay, so here's my take how arm swing contributes to jump height. It it contributes in mysterious ways, like the force. Um, and when you do a comparison as extreme as this, you get simple results. When you do a comparison, when you do a running jump with and without a ball, most people jump lower. But the reasons behind it, it's so multifaceted. It's everybody's a little different. Okay. So I hope this was helpful. And let me know if you enjoyed the video down below. I'm gonna stop recording now.